Good morning. We're going to be in Proverbs 28 today. We're going to pick up with verse 3. I think that's where we left off last time. We'll be in Proverbs 28 for a couple of weeks. And I'm going to be out one Sunday, so I don't know if someone wants to facilitate.
I think I'd like to give it a shot.
Okay.
How many weeks I got to prepare it?
It would be, I'm going to leave town next Sunday, so it'd be the Sunday after.
You got 2 weeks.
So you got 2 weeks, and what I normally do is, if you'd like to help, is you can come on at 7 a.m. because I'll be teaching this at 7 a.m. So then you can you can participate in 7 a.m. and then they'll prepare you for doing it here.
Okay.
So, because I have a 7 a.m. online men's study. So, sorry for the ladies, but it's only guys only. But,
About time.
yeah, but, so there's a 7 a.m., you have to get your coffee and get up early on a Sunday, but, that's what I normally recommend.
We just play the video from you that morning?
No, it's not the same. And you'll probably get a little bit, each lesson's a little bit different.
Right.
You get different questions, different thoughts, but you just need to facilitate. It's not hard. And I'll have a handout for you. So.
You think that's sitting flat screen up there and just.
Okay. Let's go ahead. Who would like to read verse 3?
Poor man who oppresses the poor is like a driving rain which leaves no flood.
Food.
Food.
Mine has a typo on it.
Just so what this is alluding to is like in the driving rain. Back in that day, remember we try to look at this hermeneutically. That's your $10 word for the day. But you have to look at it in context of the time and who wrote it and the audience and all that before we start to apply it to our lives, which is a lot of what we get wrong in Christianity today. But what this is talking about is a driving rain is going to knock the grain heads off. So if you're waiting for harvest and you get a driving rain at the wrong time, it'll ruin the crop, okay? And you're not going to have any food. Now he's paralleling that to depending on your translation, mine says a poor man who oppresses the poor, okay? So the idea here is this is someone who grew up poor, but now he becomes rich and he forgot where he came from, right? He's a poor person originally that came in. The example I like to use is if you've ever been around someone who used to be a smoker and they recently gave up smoking and they get around somebody that's smoking, they have zero patience for smokers, right?
Absolutely.
It's like they forget that it took them 20 years to quit smoking and they instantly come into the crowd and go, "You're gonna die of cancer. You gotta stop this immediately," right? With no self-awareness that it took them that long, right? And that's kind of this kind of thing, right? So the application here, is how do you prevent being that person? And, how are you aware that people are like that?
I think that there's just different ways to really say what your point that you're trying to get across whenever you're trying to tell someone something. So I'm just saying it's not like what you say, but like how you say it to them.
Go ahead.
I think maybe sometimes people who overcome adversity, say in this case he's poor and now he's wealthy, they become self-righteous. I did this. And I think if you will humble yourself and acknowledge the fact that everything comes from God, then you're going to be more empathetic to the person who's where you used to be.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot in church over the years. I like to think of baby Christians, A lot of people, when they come to church and they're not used to church, they don't know church ways, so they tend to cuss and they tend to not look like you and maybe not have the attitudes that are Christ-like, and some of us, you know, get very self-righteous in that, and we forget that we were once that way. And I call them baby Christians because, you know, if you take a baby and you put him on the couch and he poops on the couch, you don't spank the baby, right? The baby doesn't know, and the baby hasn't been trained.
Right.
Yet we do that with baby Christians too many times, and we drive them away. And we've got to do love and truth, and there's a reason love is first, right? And love is, like we've talked about, sometimes it's tough love. It's overlooking the offense. Okay, verse 4.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked, but such as keep the law contend with them.
Okay, so there's two parts to this verse. If you forsake the law, you praise the wicked. But what's the application if you don't forsake the law? What is Solomon and the Proverbs trying to teach us here? Not a trick question. There's a verb in there. Contend. What does contend mean?
Deal with.
Fight against,
Battle.
right? You're fighting against it, right? So how do you think self-assessment time, we can start with the nation because that's easier than talking about your own house, but start with the nation. How have Christians contended in the marketplace and in government and culture for our values over the last 50 years, 70 years, whatever? Have we contended for it? Have we?
No.
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 What does Solomon say here that we should be doing? All the way back in the Old Testament, right?
Right.
So a lot of our own problems, we wanna point at them, but there's more fingers pointing back at us, right? Because we're not contending. We wouldn't be in the shape we are if we didn't contend. You might have heard of like the 7 mountains. I don't know if you've heard of that, but there's 7 mountains. I may not remember them all, but it's faith, family, government, education, health, and there's a couple more. I think science and arts, and there's one more. But anyway, the 7 mountains of control, because the mountains in Scripture normally lead to like an obstacle. It's the government. It's symbolic. So even when Jesus says, you know, pray and move mountains, he's not literally meaning move, you know, Mount Rushmore or something. He's talking about a mountain of government, or a mountain of education, or a mountain of healthcare, or one of those. And we've got to contend in those things for our values. If we don't, then we'll be oppressed, right? And that's what we've had happen. We've had this, quote, silent majority that hasn't been contending, and see where that's gotten us. It's gotten us to, I've lost count on how many genders there are now, according to their culture, right? So, you know, that's where we need to contend, is you're made in God's image, and God is a God of justice. So he is a patient God, not that any should perish, but at the same time, he is very patient. So if you don't contend, then he'll just wait, and he'll let the oppression take its course until somebody will come up, be raised up to contend. Now, hopefully it's this next generation, because my generation and the generations before did a terrible job. So hopefully, you know, we can pour into them, they can learn from our mistakes, and they'll be the ones contending, right? That's what we hope for. And with what time we have left, we're gonna contend, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
It's like, when you read the first chapter of Joshua 1, right? Be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous. And God promised him victory everywhere he set his foot, right? And that's no different with us. God, even with Christ now, even though we're under the new covenant, not the old, he's still God. So Jesus will be there with us the whole way, but he's gonna give us that free will, and you know, he can do all things through us, but he'll do nothing if we don't do anything, right? That's kind of, he'll just be patiently waiting for somebody who does have the courage and the faith to step up. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's go to verse 5.
Evil men do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand all.
So, I'll just, will somebody want to read that note from the Life Application Bible there? In the handout?
Which one?
The note under verse 5.
How does seeking the Lord change the way?
No.
Oh, the whole. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
the paragraph.
Because justice is a part of God's character. A person who follows God treats others justly. Justice begins with concern for what is happening to others. A Christian cannot be indifferent to human suffering because God isn't. And we certainly must not contribute to human suffering through selfish business practices or unfair government policies. Be sure you are more concerned for justice than merely your own interest. You can't claim to follow God and ignore your neighbor.
So you notice that in their commentary note that they started at a very high level and then they got all the way down to love your neighbor, right? Yeah, we can all go, yeah, and then it gets to your neighbor and you go, oh, I've got that neighbor that, you know, they're hard to deal with, right? So, you know, there's always that, right? Justice, yeah. Justice starts in the home. And the idea of concentric circles, right? It starts in the family and the home, and then it extends out. And the root of no justice, other than God, of course, is that we've abandoned it in our homes and in our lives and in our hearts here. And then it's spread outward, right? Does that make sense? So how do we change that? You gonna change it in the election by your vote?
Probably not.
The results of an election are the results of the heart condition of the people voting for that person. So it has to start with us, one person.
Right. Isn't there that saying that hard times produces hard men, hard men produces easy times produce soft men. Right, and then the cycle goes, right? We had hard men in World War II, right?
Sure.
We had some really hard men, right? And we did some really hard times. And then we had this season where things were going up and the culture was being influenced, and then all of a sudden we had soft times. Okay, let's go to verse 6.
Better is the poor who walks in his integrity than one perverse in his ways, though he be rich.
So why do you think the poor with integrity is better than the one with riches and no integrity?
Because righteousness and better than, money and power.
What does that person have that the rich person without morals doesn't have?
nothing between him and God.
He doesn't have enmity with God, that's for sure, cause you make yourself an enemy of God,
Well, I
right?
mean, the poor man has no valuables. So, I mean, the only thing he has to praise for anything's God. But the rich man's got his money. If there's not any, what is it? There's not any joy, he could buy it.
Right.
So, the more money you get, the farther, it's easier to get away from God because you quit living the hard life and dependent on him.
Right. You trust in horses and chariots, right, is what the verse says.
Yeah.
In our day, it may be Ford F-250s.
401ks.
Yeah, exactly, and BMWs or whatever it might be, is your chariot.
He's not here, so I can't say it.
Yeah, so, but think of the fruits of the Spirit, right?
Yes.
They're not gonna have the fruits of the Spirit, cause those are gifts from God that are invaluable, right? So, a lot of rich people have lots of things, but they don't have peace. And peace is something we have to contend for, right? We have to contend for peace. And you need to make sure that your home is peace, right? You have to protect that peace. So if there's strife in your home, you need to figure it out and solve it, right? Because that's your home is supposed to be where that peace reigns. You can't expect that in places where you don't have the authority from a spiritual perspective. But you can still, wherever you control, you can have peace. And even where you don't have the authority, I think I've taught on this before, but especially in the spiritual warfare realm, you know, you can pray that whatever that demonic influence is, that can't manifest in your presence, right? You may not be able to change that person, but you can prevent that person from manifesting in your presence. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Or that demonic spirit manifesting, not the person. Okay, let's go on to 7. I think that's where we're at.
Whoever keeps the law is a discerning son, but a companion of gluttons shames his father.
Okay. So, what's the difference between the two sons here being compared and contrasted? It's Father's Day, so you need to figure this verse out, right? Children are supposed to be a blessing. Psalm 127, 3 through 5 says, "Blessed are those that have children, and even more if you have plenty of them, because there are arrows in your quiver, and they will take care of you in your old age. Be like a warrior with many arrows." Okay? So children are a blessing. That's how they're designed to go. But if they're not going straight and they're curving, then they're not being discerning, right? They're not following wisdom and law and God righteousness, and they curve. And typically if you curve, a lot of times they curve because of their companion and friends, right? Gluttons, fools, you know, those type of things. Anybody ever hung out with those? It's just, you know, yeah. So, you know, that tends to curve you off the path. When you go four-wheeling, you get stuck, right? So that tends to happen, you know, and you're gonna have to have somebody pull you out, right? That's why God's the good shepherd and goes after the one and leaves the 99 to pull them out. Because that person went four-wheeling where they shouldn't. Not that I've done that, just a few times. All right.
I've always been the one to pull them out.
Yeah, well, that's good. Just don't get too prideful about that, right? Okay, verse 8.
one who increases his possessions by usury and extortion gathers it for him who will feed the poor.
Okay, so this gets into an interesting discussion. So let me see if I can frame this in the context. In the context of their day, usury, the only people who would do usury and would charge interest were the Jews. But they had strict laws against it in their own community. They would only charge, to use one of their terms, the goyim, which would be you and I, the Gentiles, the foreigners. They would charge them interest, but not their own. And this is carried through to the Talmud, which is not the Torah. And there's lots of verses that are very shocking if you've ever read any of that or you've done any research. And most of the Jews follow the Talmud today. So think of it this way. The whole Torah, the whole Jewish life is centered around temple and sacrifice. That was judged in 70 AD. Why did God judge the temple in 70 AD? We know the Romans tore the temple down, but why did God it was God's house. God had to have allowed it to happen. And it was prophesied about. So why did God allow that to happen?
The destruction?
Of the temple.
I think he allowed it to happen to make a point that the things that were going on in the temple, number one, were not in accordance with his law anymore. It's like people had become rote in their actions and that their sacrifices didn't mean anything to them. And what Jesus did when he drove out the moneylenders in the temple, he did that because he was angry that they were selling, oh, here, you can buy this dove or you can buy this sheep and go do your sacrifice. So that meant nothing to the person that was bringing the sacrifice. So God allowed the destruction of the temple to say, this is no more. This is not necessary, and try to get the people to open their eyes and their minds and their hearts to the word, to the gospel that was being preached.
Yeah.
Newly.
I think you're right, but let's take it up a level. So if you're God, first off, they were all looking for the Messiah, right? The
Yeah.
Messiah
He
came.
came.
Now God, okay, put yourself in God's shoes just for a moment for this exercise. You just gave your one and only Son to die on the cross for the entire world,
Right.
that whoever shall believe, right, will be saved. Then these people that you gave your Son for have the audacity to bring in bulls and goats into your temple and slash their throats and try to say that's going to save them after you gave your Son.
Right.
That is an abomination that led to desolation, which is in the scriptures, and the temple had to be destroyed. Why? Because where is the temple today? Right. So we're baptism today. We have baptism, which is new life in that temple, right? That temple is in you. God wanted to be clear that the temple had moved. The Holy Spirit, he tried to send the signs, you know, the curtain tore, the short straws on trying to send the goat out never worked anymore. The oil lamps that had never went out. He did every sign to try to lead them, but again, free will, they chose not to. So that fast forwards here, their whole system had been built around temple and sacrifice. They didn't have a system. They had to go back to square one. So they went back to the Talmud, which they wrote in Babylon because they didn't have a temple the first time.
Right.
And then they expanded on it. And there's no God in it. Not really. And if you read any of those things, it's very shocking. I mean, there's verses in there that allow them to rape children up to a certain age. Yes, all kinds of things that are clearly unscriptural, right?
Yeah, right.
So, and back to the usury topic, sorry for the rabbit trail. Back to the usury topic. Usury was allowed then, but under the new covenant, once Christ came, we're all level. It's a level playing field. So this is now partiality. If you're charging usury to only one group of people, and not single the Jews out. Mormons do this, right? They only do business with Mormons, and you know, there's lots of cults. You know, they ostracize people, or they won't. You know, that's not how God viewed it. We're supposed to all be on one level. The ground is level at the cross, right? Okay, I think I beat that verse to death. Okay, let's go on to verse 9.
God detests the prayers of a person who ignores the law.
What would be the New Testament equivalent to this verse? I'll give you a hint. If you've been to CR, you probably know it. James 5:16. Anybody know it? None of my CR people know it?
What is it?
James 5:16, right? The prayers of a
Righteous
are both powerful and effective, right? So, this is saying the opposite. It's saying if you don't have righteousness, that even your prayers are an abomination. So one of the clues in your prayer life, if you're stuck, you know, and you're not getting answers, it may be some kind of sin in your life. You know, it could be that you're not. There's a great book, it's called Secrets of a Prayer Warrior or something. I've got it. Remind me after class and I'll send it to you. But that book talks about how to get your prayers answered every time. There's one clear way, and that's to pray God's will. So the problem we have many times is we don't want God's will. We want our will. And if you're stubborn enough and you pray enough for your will, then God will give you your will. And you're going to wish you didn't get your will. Because God's will is better for you than your will. And sometimes He will do that just out of discipline. Okay, you asked for it. Here it is. Anybody listen to that great theologian, Garth Brooks? Thank God for unanswered prayers, right? Anybody else in that camp? There's some prayers I'm very thankful He didn't answer, right? So, any questions on that? Thoughts? Let's go on to verse 10.
Whoever causes the upright to go astray in an evil way, he himself will fall into his own pit, but the blameless will inherit good.
Okay, so once again, the impression here is that someone, the person that's digging the pit to get a righteous person to fall in it, will fall in the pit he dug. So we have several examples of this in the Bible. We have Haman, if you remember, in the book of Esther. He built the gallows for Mordecai to hang him, and then he ended up being hung on it. If you went to Sunday school as a child, you probably read all about Daniel and the lion's den, right? And what happened to the men that threw Daniel into the lion's den? They went back into the den, right? They dug the pit, they plotted the plan, and it came back on them, you know? So, the evil will be repaid. It's just sometimes you can't take that too far. We don't always see it repaid in our lifetime. So if you go to the Hall of Fame of Faith, which I believe is Hebrews 11, you'll see a whole list of people that died in faith, right? So that doesn't mean that the evil wasn't repaid, it just meant it wasn't repaid in their lifetime. Charlie Kirk would be an example of us, right? A righteous guy who died in faith, right? Because of an evil plan. But that evil plan will get exposed. It will come to light. Not yet, but it's coming. Facts are coming out now. So, what can you do to help others not fall into the pits dug by the wicked?
You can make them aware that maybe someone who's trying to do that to them. Go to the side. You see something like that happening, I think that, have nothing to do, and you need to talk to them and let them know what's going on.
Go ahead.
When my kids were little, I homeschooled and we learned that, in the government, there's training that is done with money, that we show the real thing, the real thing, the real thing, the real thing, so that when they're confronted with the counterfeit, they will immediately know it. And so we use that as a biblical lesson. Teach the truth, teach the truth, teach the truth, teach the truth, and then when you're confronted with a lie, you will know it. But I think it's also important that it's our job to uplift, exhort, and encourage our brethren in the right path. And so sometimes it's more well received to be positive and encouraging than to always be tearing down. Don't do that, don't do that, don't. Let's point them in the direction of this is the right path, and this is the way to go.
Be a Barnabas, right?
Yes.
An encourager,
Yes.
right? No, I agree with you. And at the same time, you have to know your limits, right? So people have free will, so you can kind of speak wisdom into them, but
Yes.
sometimes falling in the pit is the best lesson.
It is.
And, those of you with young kids, you're not there yet, but those of us that have older kids, I can tell you that, you can preach, you can tell them 1,000 times that there's a pit, but sometimes they don't learn until they fall in it.
That's right.
And if you try to do everything you can and body block them and do everything else to keep them out of falling in the pit, then you just prolong the problem and the pit gets bigger and you're not there to help. So sometimes letting them fall in the pit is the best way, especially younger, right?
Yeah.
The younger they are, the easier and the less consequences. Okay. Let's see, what verse are we on now?
11.
11? Okay. Go ahead. Who'd like to read?
The rich man is wise in his own eyes, but the poor who has understanding searches for God.
Okay. Do you see the irony here? Because the rich man, you would think worldly, right? The guy must have wisdom or intellect or something because he's got this wealth and, he's got all this, but yet even the poor person who's assumed by our culture sees straight through it, right? He sees that he's actually got his wealth by being a slumlord or lying or, taking advantage of the poor or that type of thing. So, what is the danger for us? I mean, the root of this is pride, right? So what is the danger for us and how can we protect against that and encourage others.
Can you repeat the question one more time, please?
So how do we apply this verse? If we know pride is the issue, then how do we, first help ourselves? Think of the analogy on the airplane, right? Oxygen mask comes on, you gotta first put it on yourself, then you help others. So how do you apply this verse to yourself, and then how do you apply it to others?
You can't save anyone, you can't save yourself.
Right.
I think surrounding yourself with accountability partners as well. Someone who can see from the outside in, that will keep you grounded.
It's Father's Day today. So, do children sometimes tell you things that you didn't see in yourself? Can children sometimes humble you?
Absolutely.
Right? So, you've got to be able to receive that, act on that wisely, not shut it down and get defensive with pride. And then at the same time, you got to be able to have a relationship that you can go to a brother and say, whatever it is, JD, I'm seeing a little bit of pride here. I'm just trying to make you aware of it. Love you, brother. That's why I'm telling you. You got to be able to be that person to others so that you can protect them. That's being loving, right? If you're married, you've got a built-in help on that. Because my wife can sense it like a bloodhound. Any kind of pride.
Yeah, so I think that all the other times that I've tried sobriety, been in recovery, I never had a support system to hold me accountable. Someone who really had my best interests, and I think that's the difference maker this time and all the other rehabilitations I've been to, times that I've went in small, short periods of time that, just people holding me accountable, just positive people that I know that will give me good advice in my best interest, not just trying to get something out of me.
Right. Probably changing your surroundings and changing your friends. Right.
I got real friends now.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what that was. I've called a lot of people friends in my life, and I really didn't even know the real meaning to it, like what it was supposed to be or feel like whenever, we interacted or hung out. So this is like, it's night and day this last year.
Yeah. It's funny you should say real friends. It made me think of love, right? So when we adopted our girls, they were 5 and 7. And the 5-year-old came first, and she came from a hard place, of abuse every way. So she first got in our house the first week, and she'd never been to preschool or anything. And Heather took her to Wendy's, and they're sitting at Wendy's, and she asked Heather, she called her Mama Heather, she said, Mama Heather, how come Daddy Coco doesn't love you? And she said, of course he loves me. And she says, no, because he doesn't hit you. Right? So see, some of us have definitional problems, right? Those are deep-rooted definitional problems that we don't know what love is. We don't know what true friends are. We don't know all these things because we've been influenced by the world or our surroundings, And we've got to be able to get past that, and we got to love people enough. And I can tell you with those girls in the home, that was a long-term thing. There was a lot of trauma in our home, and there was not much peace for long periods, because of what wasn't the girl's fault, but it was what they were carrying. There was a lot of demonic stuff inside them. I have pictures, and their eyes were not even, there was like no light. You know what I'm talking about? The darkness in
100%.
someone's eyes.
Yes.
When I first got them to later.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, we have a dark world, and there's a lot of dark things that are going on, and sometimes you have to have a little bit of grace, and you gotta step back and say, you know, this person is being very caustic, they're doing all this, but maybe it's because they had some kind of trauma, they had something going on, maybe I need to pray for them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Instead of just getting out the hammer. You know? Hopefully that helps. Okay, verse, where are we at, 12?
When the righteous rejoice, there is great glory, but when the wicked arise, men hide themselves.
So I thought about this verse, and we've had similar things, but I think the hide here, to me, denotes fear. And the one thing that I think, at least in my lifetime, that fear drove us the most was COVID. So we had an irrational fear, you know? If you think about it, and I'm no stranger to it, good luck, we'll be there cheering you on, buddy. But, you know, I mean, we all went out, or at least I did, and bought like bandanas to tie around our mouths and, you know, all this, and it was an irrational fear. I mean, my girl was in junior high, and she was doing cross-country running, and they made her wear a mask outside during cross-country running.
No.
And I tried to fight the school, you know, and, you know, she had rashes on her face from wearing these dirty masks, and, you know, I mean, it was totally irrational fear, and we all fell for it. We traded a Messiah in a white robe for a doctor in a white coat. Okay?
And it was so easy to happen.
Yes. We misplaced our trust. And we fell for fear. Now there's a certain amount of being wise and not taking extraordinary risk, but the Bible tells us 365 times not to fear, yet we ignored it, every one of them, right, during that period, and we did it on almost a global scale. And hopefully we've learned from that. And well, I know personally it changed my life. I mean, my faith after COVID was a lot stronger. And maybe it's because of the trials I went through during it, you know, being threatened with my job and everything else. But, you know, these things happen for a reason. So, you know, we have to have the self-awareness to understand that we shouldn't fear like that again. And if you have fear welling up inside of you, unless there's a rattlesnake or a coral snake in front of you, then it's probably not justified, right? We have fear that sometimes changes our behavior, and the Bible is explicit on that. So I've talked about this before, but you should think of your mind as triage, right? An emergency room. And when a thought comes into your head, you need to think about it and say, is this producing faith or is this producing fear? And if it's producing fear, toss it away. Because God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of a sound mind. Right. So just understand that not only is fear bad, fear is a sin. Because fear cannot coexist with faith. It takes either faith or fear, and that's our option. That's our free will. And you can go through the book of Hebrews. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to him except through the Father. But even when Jesus wasn't here, the Old Testament, the book of Hebrews is full of people that got to see Jesus because they lived in faith. Faith is the root, even without Jesus, right? Do you understand that?
Mhm.
I mean, like, we have this argument, like, theologically, of, you know, what about the pygmies who never hear Jesus? Well, if they have faith, the creation sings out,
It does.
right? We have
Yes.
Old Testament saints that never heard of Jesus, but they lived through faith
Yes.
to see his death.
Romans
Right.
tells us if you have faith and you're able to see the miracles of God and you deny them, you'll be without excuse because, here, I'll pull it up. People that, you know, they're using that, you know, right there, people that have never heard of God, Amazonian people, stuff like that. But they've witnessed the miracles that he made, the sunsets, rainbows.
Yeah.
They know that there's a higher power
Exactly.
and they acknowledge that. And God says the people that see all those and don't acknowledge it, you'll be without excuse. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, God's not gonna hold people accountable for what they haven't heard, but once you've heard it, you're accountable.
Then you're.
Jesus said, hot, God would rather be hot or cold, cause lukewarm he'll spew you out of his mouth. Better to not know than to know but not
And
follow.
not-
Right, obedience
Not
is
know
better
or
than
know, but
sacrifice.
if you know and don't follow,
Yes.
he just soon spew you out.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what the verse was talked about in the prayer, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you have wickedness and sin in your heart, it's gonna hinder your prayers. Just like not loving your wife will hinder your prayers on Father's Day. I know that was a tough one for me to say, but nonetheless, it's true. So, any last thoughts before we close out? Okay. Who would like to close us out in prayer? You wanna kill the video?